Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of WTALKS. My name is Kürşat, and I'm your co-host with my colleague and friend, Jean-Marc. Hello, Jean.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. Thanks, Kirshat, for the introduction. I'm Jean-Marc, WeWalk's head of R&D, and it's been 4 weeks since our last podcast. We need to give the people more, Kirshat, but that's why we're back here today, and I promise you we're going to do better. And I am honored to be joined by the very amazing Natalie Doig. And I'm not even going to begin to list all the things that you do because I will let you do that yourself.
Oh,
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Marc. I'm really, really pleased to be here. Yeah, really looking forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah. So Natalie, tell us about all the things that you do. Tell us about your story, your progression in life, and then all the little ventures and advisory work
I'll try and keep it brief. I'll talk about my impairment first. So I was born with cataracts. So I'm one of the few people who didn't lose my sight. I gained it. So I was blind when I was born, and then they operated on me a few times as a baby, and I gained sight. So that's lovely. But the sight I gained is not the greatest, but it's brilliant for me. And I went to a mainstream school, and we travelled a lot because my dad was in the Air Force. So I got to see a lot of the UK, which was brilliant. And I decided to become a teacher. And I wanted to become an English and drama teacher because I really loved those subjects. But I now realise that I also chose to do that because it felt safe, because I understood about schools and I knew how to fit into a school. I knew how to make a school accessible. And this was in the 1990s, so it was before we had any legislation around reasonable adjustments. And so I was a teacher for 3 years, but I came up against discrimination. And in fact, the head teacher of the school in the end was taken to court over discrimination, so it wasn't just me. And I left and went to the job centre kind of thinking, what am I going to do? I've had to resign from this school because of discrimination. And I was sent to see a man called Big Jim, who was the employment advisor for disabled people at the job centre. And I said to Big Jim, I want your job. And he said, great. And that's what I did. I became a disability employment advisor. And from there, I got to work on a secondment with RNIB. This is almost 20 years ago exactly. I went to work at RNIB with Moorfields Eye Hospital, partnering with them to look at how to keep people with visual impairments in work. So getting in there really early before they even were registered as, say, partially sighted, as it was back then. And from there, I've worked all over the place, worked for the Mayor of London, worked for the Disability Rights Commission, ran my own business for 10 years. And currently I work for Scope, who are a UK disability charity, as their equality and diversity advisor. But I do that part-time so that I can still do some other things as well. But that's me.
I love that you just mentioned in passing. Yeah, I worked for the Mayor of London. Just like, wow, okay.
Also, as far as I know, you both know yourself from outside of the WeWalk. So you are working for the IDAC. So what is IDAC? Could you give more information about it, and what's your responsibility, and how is it going in IDAC?
So IDAC is the Independent Disability Advisory Group for Transport for London. And I started there 3.5 years ago. And it's been going for quite a while. When I worked for the Mayor of London, that was 2002 to 2004, there wasn't an IDAC, and it was one of the recommendations that we made. Back then I was working on the European Year of Disabled People. And yeah, so we said, you need to have an advisory group. The Met Police had one at the time, and we said TfL should. So yeah, it's a group that advises on accessibility and inclusion, and we get to work on lots of really exciting projects, don't we, Jean-Marc?
Oh, loads of exciting projects. And that actually segues on to the next one. I kind of know what you're going to say on this, Natalie, because we worked on this together. But tell me, what has been sort of the biggest, most challenging projects? We're not going to name them by name, but just sort of what have been the most recurring challenges, if you like, at TfL? And I'll weigh in on this as well.
As well, yeah. I think it's funny because it isn't just a challenge at TfL. It's something that I noticed about 5 years ago when I was working for RNIB and working on a bus campaign. And it was that the style of the new buses were beginning to change, and they were beginning to try and make the buses more appealing to people that wouldn't normally get on a bus. So they were designing them to look more like cars. So they had like dark leather seats and grey, and it looked very airy and spacious. And I was wondering, when I was standing on this bus and they were showing it off to me, why does it look and feel so spacious? And then I realised it was because I couldn't see the grab poles. So my first thought was there weren't any. And it turned out that there were, but they were grey against charcoal and you just couldn't see them. And I've seen this design sort of style now spread, and at TfL we've come across it on buses, on trains, on London Underground trains as well as overground trains. Luckily we've come across it in the planning stage, and so we've been able to raise it as an issue. And the difficulty that I have, and you might know more about this, Jean-Marc, from the scientific point of view, is I don't have any scientific evidence to give to bus designers or operators or to TfL that says, you know, this particular colour is best or this particular colour, you know, isn't. And in fact, what I do have though is I've worked with so many visually impaired people over the years that I know for a fact that if you ask them what colour would you prefer, there will be lots of disagreement over what colour you prefer. But if you ask them what colour do you not want, then those that do have useful vision will always say the same thing: not grey, not silver. And the reason why is that our brains, I think, interpret it as space, as a gap, as there being nothing there rather than there being something there, because that's what kind of grey is. And it's really awful for people who, with some particular impairments like macular degeneration, because you begin to have these little absences in your sight. And so you just think that's what it is. And although that's not my eye condition, I have had macular edema. So I do know what it's like, and it's scary. And that, you know, to then go on to be on public transport looking for something like a safety feature, which is what a grab rail is. I think the funniest thing that I ever had was on a mock-up of a new train, obviously not yet in service, looking at these grey poles and saying, but, you know, why do we have the poles? And the guy's going, oh, it's a safety feature. And I then said, but you said that this thing here that we've got around the doors is a new safety feature, that it's bright yellow so that everyone can see that the doors are closing. So why isn't that grey? Why didn't you paint the door closing signal grey? And he was like, well, because no one would see it. So, you know, you could get them to realise that it was illogical. But I think grab rails, particularly in handrests and the colours of seating, it's really tough to get people away from this mindset of it's about style rather than it being functional and actually very, you know, a safety feature.
Yeah, I think you touched on this before as well, and the reason why we just don't end up seeing, you know, improved colors is because of that lack of scientific evidence. I mean, there is, you know, I can piece together literature to lead to that conclusion, but that's just not how building standards and regulations work. It's not people piecing together different literature to make a conclusion. It's you have a quick, brief look, you go, okay, there's nothing clearly conclusively there, therefore it's clearly not important, which is totally true. I mean, you cannot, just because there's not a statistic in front of you or a quantifiable measure, you cannot then go, that doesn't exist.
And I think the issue is that because they do talk about, you know, contrast, and there is a way of measuring contrast with your, you know, that gets them, you know, engineers, and I totally understand this, and designers like that, it's factual. But of course, 2 shades of grey can actually have good contrast. Yeah. But how a brain interprets those 2 shades of grey is going to be really, really different to how it would, say, interpret red on grey, or, you know, blue on grey, or, you know, there's a lot of nuance there. But also thinking about our friends out there that don't see colour, one of the other issues around the grab rails is the inconsistency with them, that, you know, it's like sometimes the grab rails will be straight up, sometimes they'll be curved. There's a lot of now movement to have, because they want them to look less intrusive and less like a bus or a train and more like a car. They're going for these sort of curves, and it means that you miss the pole, and particularly if you're a cane user, you know, there's no pole for you to, because it's curved. So yeah, there's a lot of things like that where I can totally understand why a designer thinks this looks good, but it actually takes away from its practical purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have a question for Kirshat now, because you know we're micro-analyzing grab poles, but I want to know what it's like in Turkey, Kirshat. What's public transport like for you?
Actually, it's where can I start, Jamark? Because transportation covers many different areas: aviation, buses, pedestrians, and tubes, etc. But overall, when I look at the overall, um, I can give a grade 8 out of 10, because when I think of the city life, while I'm using the tube or buses, they're all really accessible, and also this journey, this experience is designed as an accessible journey, because your experience starts with getting ticket, or going down to the tube. So it's not just about the bus travel experience or metro travel experience. So all machines are talking, and also ticket machines are talking, and ATMs, and also and all traffic lights, not all, let's say most of them are talking. And also when I get on a bus, I can hear the bus stop announcements, and also they are accessible for wheelchair users as well. And also when I get off the bus, most of the sidewalks have how can I say,
Like paving, I'm guessing you want to say.
pavements,
Yeah.
The tactile pavement.
tactile pavements,
Yeah.
yes, tactile pavement. However, I have to say that unfortunately there are many sidewalks. Unfortunately, they are not accessible. So they are really narrow, and there are many obstacles on the on the sidewalk. So that's why so tubes or buses, and also tactile payments are really good. However, we there however sidewalks have to be improved. Also, transportation is not limited with uh, getting on a bus or metro. So it's a end-to-end experience. And in these days, we are covering the rest of the needs with the WeWalk's latest features. We provide clockwise direction navigation, or while I'm waiting at the bus stop, I can get information about the bus timeline. Or this is the feature maybe that I like most. While I am walking on the street, I can hear the name of the stores, restaurants, cafes while I am passing by. So also this experience, we are covering the whole experience with the WeWalk, and hopefully it's going to be more comprehensive day by day.
That sounds amazing.
There's
And Yeah, I'm just really, I'm in a way, I'm sad that I'm surprised about that. I wish I'd known how accessible Turkey is. Is it the big cities, or is it like this if you went to a small town?
Big cities. However, when we go to the small towns and small cities, they are getting more accessible because big city making the big cities accessible is tougher than when we compare the small cities.
Mm.
For example, Istanbul is a really historical city, and when we go to the old city, old town, um, you know, all sidewalks are historical, etc., and streets are narrow. So this historical structure is uh, is not giving a permission to develop more accessible city at some point. I can understand, but we shouldn't avoid to push accessibility, because I'm sure that it can be more accessible,
Yeah.
no end.
Yeah. I actually want to pick up on something you said there, Kirshat, because I saw Natalie's face. Even with my little vision, I saw Natalie's face light up when you said talking ticketing and talking ATMs. Tell me why you got so excited, Natalie.
Well, when I worked for RNIB, I took over the Talking ATMs campaign. So I did a lot of work. Hugh Huddy started the campaign, and then I took over. And it was really hard getting the banks to agree to get ATMs. Some of them it was harder than others, and we knew that this technology existed in Europe and in America, and it's been a sort of bugbear of mine that if we can do it with ATMs, we should be able to do it with ticket machines. In fact, any kind of vending machine, we should be able to make them talk. And it's been really hard to get that kind of technology adopted in the UK. And for all kinds of different reasons. So to hear that you have them, in Turkey, and that, as you said, the end-to-end journey is so important. It actually stops many visually impaired people from being able to travel spontaneously. And for me, when I first started 20 years ago in campaigning around transport, it was all about, access to transport. Now for me, it's actually about being able for disabled people to be able to travel independently and spontaneously. And yeah, if you can't just, my train station where I live in a small sort of market town in England is only manned until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then there's nobody in the ticket office, so you have to use the touchscreen machine. And if you can't use it because you're visually impaired or for any other reason, that's it, you're stuck. The way they seem to have gone in the UK is, rather than going down the, well, let's make the ticket machines accessible, is they seem to have now gone to accessible tickets. So as long as you're not traveling into London, I can now travel with a ticket on my mobile phone or on my watch, which is a lot better. Or you can print your tickets at home. And, fair enough, if that's the way we're going, and we're going to be getting rid of ticket machines anyway, because they want everyone to go that way, I'm not going to, that's not the hill I'm going to die on around accessible ticket machines. But where you've already got them, I mean, that's amazing. That's really good.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I'm curious, and I know we mentioned this really briefly in passing. It's technology for visually impaired people. It's changing so quickly. And so, it's kind of weird because you kind of say, okay, we still have things like the white cane, which hasn't been innovated upon. And you see like sort of big gaps. But on other areas, you see tech that's being developed, almost being surpassed by other tech. And you mentioned at the beginning about ATMs, for instance, and sort of how they came into play and how they actually ended up being almost obsolete on arrival, which was, quite interesting.
Yeah. So that was the sad thing, really, is it took us so long. The first ATM was introduced to the UK in 1967. So the final banks signed up to make their ATMs accessible on that anniversary. So that's how I know it. So that was, 40 years or 50. My brain's not working today. since on the anniversary. So yeah, 50 years. And it was, so by the time that, you know, we'd got that agreed in 2017, what we needed was to have a whole gang of visually impaired people to go out there, be using them, to be using ATMs and persuading their friends who were a bit more sort of reluctant to try the technology to do that. But all those people that were into the technology, the visually impaired people that wanted to give things a try, had moved on from ATMs. They weren't using cash anymore. They were using their phones and they were using, you know, contactless. And that actually made it then really difficult to encourage others to use it. You need those kind of, you know, people to go out there and lead the way. And although we did get that to a certain degree, I think one of the best things that I ever experienced in that campaign was we took an ATM to a meeting of visually impaired people, and a man who was in his 80s who had never even touched an ATM, because when they came in the 60s, he'd already lost his sight. And so he just thought, I'm never going to be able to use this technology. There's no point in me learning what it is. And that day he learned how to use one with the headphones in. And for the first time withdrew some, it was only toy money at that point, but he withdrew some Monopoly money. And, you know, he spent his time feeling around it and learning what it was. And that was absolutely amazing. And he said he would use one in the future. He'd go into the branch and use it. And, you know, so that was great. But yeah, it was too late. It really was too late. The technology has moved on so much, and the banks were telling us while we were doing it, well, you know, at some point ATMs are going to become, you know, if not completely obsolete, but, you know, they don't want cash. They want us all to go contactless. Yeah, so I mean, technology is amazing. I always tell people that I am less disabled than I was 15 years ago because of technology. And that's, you know, that's just amazing, really, to think of it.
And this brings us to our perfect last question of the evolution of technology. And actually, Kürşad, would you like to ask? Would you like to end the episode since he's so gracious?
Yes, you are in the accessible transportation world, and I'm curious, what do you see in the future in this area?
Yeah, so for the future, for me personally, I want to get in a driverless car. I want to be able to make the most of those. I think the technology is really exciting. So that, you know, it's going to, I'm not expecting it overnight, but it's really exciting. But also part of me is a little bit reluctant to put, you know, kind of put my dreams in one day having my own car, because it's not sustainable. And I love public transport, and I think we should be encouraging more use of public transport, because greener public transport is the way forward. But yeah, driverless cars just sound really exciting for a visually impaired person. I also, just to be actually a bit more boring, one of the things that I'm really interested in the UK that they're piloting are these on-demand buses. So they're a hybrid between taxis and buses. So they will have, you can basically use your phone, your smartphone or phone app, and book the bus, and the bus will come and pick you up from your sort of nearest street corner and take you to where you want to go. But you've got to realise that that might take you a bit longer than, say, a taxi, because it'll be picking other people up on the route, and it's likely to cost you, you know, a bit more than bus fare, but a bit cheaper than a taxi. So
it's going to be more really sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. So more people will be able to use these vehicles, and I think they're trialing, you know, green vehicles, minibuses, basically, again, that all look very nice. But the drivers will have all been trained as well. So unlike, you know, a taxi driver or an Uber driver who won't have had that kind of training, the bus drivers will have all been given training in, you know, visual awareness and disability awareness. So that, I think, is really exciting if it can work.
Yeah, it was our last question. However, I have to add one more comment. Trained drivers are so important part of our accessible transportation, our accessible journey, and also technology. I believe technology is also breaking the barriers between the drivers and impaired people, and they are getting more trained day by day. And when I was in the USA, I called an Uber, and I got on car, and when I got on the car, I just started to wait to go, but driver didn't drive, and I started to get a little bit upset. Why we are still in the same place, and why don't you go? And I started to say something to himself, why don't you go, etc. And there is no response. And in 30 seconds, 40 seconds, he touched me. He touched my hand, and he then I understood he's hearing. He has hearing impaired.
Oh.
So yeah, and after that I checked my smartphone,
Yeah.
because I thought he wrote something to me,
Yeah.
and then he started to chat with himself, and then I understood he's waiting me to fasten my seatbelt. So and then during the way we talked over chat panel, and it was really enjoyable travel for myself.
Fantastic. And you wouldn't have been able to do that without technology.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing story. Wow. Where the and yeah, I also want to take it back to the mention of cars. Every visually impaired person I've spoken to, the majority of them, and me included, all really, really want to drive. It's something really rebellious about us. Like, we know it's not a good idea, but if you gave us a car on a private road, you know we would get onto that, and we know
Yeah.
we would.
I dream about driving. Do you dream about driving? I
Yeah,
have dreams that I'm driving a car, and then I know I'm going to get caught. But I'm actually doing quite a good job, and I'll be driving my friends around, or I'll be trying to get home. And then it's then it turns into more of the nightmare kind of scenario that you have, that someone's going to catch me and I'm going to get in trouble because I shouldn't be driving.
Yeah, exactly, Natalie. I dream myself
Yeah.
in prison.
Oh, because you've been caught.
Yeah.
Haven't gone that far.
It's like, what's going to catch me first, the cops or my visual impairments? Like, and on that bombshell, I sound like Top Gear now. No, I'm not. This has been an absolutely amazing episode. Natalie, thank you very much for your fresh perspective on public transport. I think, I really like this sort of looking at different fields, because we used to always focus on tech, and now we're talking about, who knows what we're going to get next. We might get
and it touches all of our lives now. There's not one aspect of our lives that isn't touched by technology.
Exactly, yeah. But we're gonna, I mean, we'll see where it goes. I mean, WTALKS is going strong. I promise you, to our audience members watching, we promise we're going to be less than 4 weeks until the next episode. And by the way, 6 weeks later, when I start the next episode, I'll definitely apologize. I'm so sorry. And Kirsha, thanks for your time. Please catch us on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks for being a part of the WeWalk family.